This is the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. My name is Angelica. I am your host, and today I'm joined by Jenny Smillie, who is an early years specialist and forest school leader, and also the founder of Journeys, Leaves and Seeds Community Interest Company. Thank you very much, Jenny, for joining on the Voice of Early Childhood podcast.
Thanks for having me, Angelica. I'm really excited to be here and really honoured to be asked. I've been following the website and the podcast for a while now, so it's very exciting for me and I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you, and especially on such an interesting topic. So we're going to be discussing the therapeutic nature of outdoor play today, and it would be great for you to let us know a little bit more about yourself to really start the conversation around this, because a lot of the work that you do and your article that you've written is all based around lots of the kind of the things that you've been working on in the past and very recently as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. So I was actually just reflecting today, and I think it's popped up in my diary that's actually a year today or this week where I started my forest school journey. So that was my initial 5 days of training in the forest to become a forest school leader. And thinking about straight away about the therapeutic nature of it, I know that for myself, just those 5 days, I just felt a sense of, like, this is so good to be outside, and the stress levels were reduced. So it's quite fitting that today that we're recording this episode as well today on World Mental Health Day, because there's lots of focus around the therapeutic benefits of being outside and also moving your body outside as well, or just moving your body in general. So I think all of it's come together quite nicely today, really, for this recording. So yeah, I started my forest school journey this time last year. I've completed my level 3 qualification now, and that's quite a big piece of work. I think people need to be aware of that. There's nothing to say, and I hope the article does come across to show that you don't need a forest school qualification to get children outside to do some of these activities. You can absolutely get children outside and support them in their learning and play outside to benefit everyone. But the forest school journey for me is quite a long process, and it's really helped me to reflect on how I engage with children, particularly children in the early years. But also, I then moved on to think about supporting children with additional needs as well outside. During my time, during this year, I've been able to study as well the therapeutic skills for outdoor leaders, and that was really focusing on supporting children with additional needs, speech and language difficulties, behavioural problems, children with neurodivergent conditions. So it was really useful to then apply that in practice and support some of the work that I've been doing with children with additional needs in the forest school setting, and seeing how they approach it and how beneficial it's been for them in their play and in their learning, and also supporting parents as well as a space for their own nurture. It's been really interesting journey for me. So I thought it would help to write a little article around that to support practitioners that are thinking about how do I enable children to get outside more, but children in particular that they might worry about being outside, the risks, because there are risks. But often, sometimes it can be felt that they might be a bit too risky to have children that maybe like to run or like to eat everything, put everything in their mouth, that sort of thing. So I think it's this article was kind of just a very touch the surface of this can be done, and it is very beneficial. And I urge you to get outside more and support children's learning outside.
And you're so right when you say about the outdoors being so beneficial for our mental health. Of course, like we always hear that, and if we kind of reflect on ourselves, I guess. So I was just thinking when you said that as well, like this last few weeks, probably I haven't really spent much time outdoors, and I have kind of noticed the fact that it has affected my mental health, and I'm missing being outdoors, I'm missing the fresh air, and I'm missing that kind of feeling, like you said, just that you kind of let things go a little bit more.
Yeah.
it's so vital for children, especially because they feel that freedom of the outdoors. There's none of those, or not as many, at least, constraints, the space and the kind of built up environment, not so many rules. And that's just for any young child, but specifically for children with disabilities or kind of specific needs, where a lot of the time they may be limited in terms of what they kind of can and can't do because of mainly their own safety, but also in terms of that perception we have of them of disturbing other children's learning or disturbing their own learning just because they do things differently, or maybe perhaps, they're a little bit fast at reacting, or they kind of, their movements are quite, more unpredictable, I guess.
Yeah.
So like you say, it's a lot harder to I guess, work with children outdoors that require more support, because you have to think about it more, don't you? There's a lot of things that you need to put into place. And I guess, like you say, training as well. You've got to have some, the training there as well. What about those educators that aren't necessarily trained to work with children outdoors? They may be perhaps trained as SEN.
Yeah.
How would you say they can use their current skills and knowledge to really think about, okay, how do I apply this to the outdoors? It's a different kind of mindset, isn't it?
I think it's embracing the unique nature of being outside. So don't overthink it, really. I think for me, the unique nature of outdoor learning for children, what benefits them the most is the fact that it's open-ended. There's no right or wrong way to use the outdoor area, particularly in nature. It's not designed, as you mentioned, indoors by adults. So they can construct with it how they want. They can use that space in a way that they want that's more meaningful to them. A stick can be a million different things. Playing in mud can be a sensory experience, or it can be a mud kitchen, or it can be a fort, it can be a wormery. So I think what I would say to those practitioners that perhaps are working with children with additional needs, are worried about being in the outdoor environment, embrace the unique nature of being outside. It is so open-ended. Children feel that sense of freedom, I think. And I think if you embrace that as an adult, then you're really going to be tuning into what's special about being outside, and what is helping children to actually become motivated to stay on task, because they can apply themselves in the way that best fits them.
And like you mentioned there, modeling, so adults really modeling the love for outdoors and getting involved, and not thinking, oh, it's too cold out there, or it's too messy, or it's too muddy. That's so important, because that really is showing children that love for nature and embracing it. And I say so often, it's like the term that everyone kind of knows me for, especially kind of with my friends and family, is that there's no bad weather, it's just bad clothing, which is that classic kind of forest school term, isn't it?
Definitely.
Everyone knows about. And I think it's so important to be able to really kind of embed that as a practitioner, but also support parents and families to embed that in everything that they do, because it's our kind of those little things that we say or do, those little actions, the subconscious kind of things that we don't necessarily notice, that children do pick up on, and then that puts them off, doesn't it?
Definitely. I mean, I've just been doing some research with a group of nurseries and childminders, because I'm writing some training on the magic of outdoor learning. And, watching the children outside, not necessarily in the forest, but just in their outdoor settings. I've been in Liverpool and it's been pouring it down with rain, and the children have been stood there with the mouths open and catching, raindrops like pouring rain on the tongue. And children are not bothered about that. It's also often that more concerned about whether it's too wet. But we have to be comfortable. It's not nice if you're sopping wet and you're cold. So it is important that, and children will feel that as well if they're not in the right gear, and particularly children with additional needs who might be distressed by sensations or sounds or feelings. So we need to consider all these things to make it a supportive environment that's going to get the most benefits. But if we are well equipped, children are well equipped, adults are well equipped, there's no reason why we can't embrace that weather and the unique nature of all the different seasons in one day sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just going to say, children take joy in things like that, where it's raining and there's different weathers, and splashing in puddles and getting muddy and wet, and just seeing the effects of, their actions or the weather and all these changes. And it's that innate joy that they express and feel. And I think the fact that adults kind of take that away with their own kind of perceptions, views and behaviours is quite sad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
it shouldn't be that way.
The season we're coming into now, potentially, you'd never get outside, especially if you live up north. So we've got to really embrace like the unique nature of the outdoor environment. Children won't be put off by it if they are well equipped, well resourced, and got comfortable clothing. Then they can get changed. So it's enabling them to experience, because otherwise we're missing out a lot, and we're limiting children's. Like you said, you noticed the difference when you hadn't, you've been busy, you've not been able to get outside as much as you like. I do. I notice it now. My thing is to try and get outside first thing in the morning and go for a run and move, because that I know if I don't do that, I feel different, throughout the day. And actually, that's true of children. And yourself, if you've worked with any children and young children, if they haven't had that opportunity to be outside during the day, they are climbing the walls. So they need that space, they need that freedom. And it's not just about letting them go and let off steam. And I think that's why in the article I talked about that unhurried approach to outdoor learning. So letting them have the time to be outside. It's not right, off you go outside, 15 minutes, go and let off some steam. That's not enough. They need that unhurried time, particularly children with additional needs, but all children, I'd argue, so that they're not rushed. They can feel they can feel the benefits of actually being engaged and being absorbed and being involved in the outdoor environment, whether it's a forest or whether it's just your outdoor area. As long as they've got that space and freedom, they can explore their bodies, they can explore their learning in a different way. They can be louder, they can be quieter. They might find a little den or a nook where they can go and hide. And often there's a sense of being away from adults. If they've made a little den, they think that you can't see them. So there's that sense of security and uniqueness. So I think we need to be thinking about how do we offer it in more extended periods as well, not just right, they've been in for too long, let's get them out.
And like you said earlier about practitioners working with children with SEND, so it's not about overthinking it, like you said, but perhaps then just allowing more time, and that kind of being the main factor that leads the way in terms of outdoor learning and the therapeutic elements of it, just slowing down and letting children explore rather than planning all these things and thinking, how am I going to sustain that child's interaction? What activity can I plan? Actually, that then becomes overthinking and planning too much. And then that's where you've got to then have all these risk assessments in place and think, what if this, and all these uncertainties, I guess. The only thing really you need to be doing is just ensuring that the environment is as safe and risk-free as possible with, those considerations of, there's different plants that they can, of course, touch, like stinging nettles and things, but it's having those conversations, but not overthinking it too much in terms of bringing in too much complexity yourself. I guess it's just bringing yourself and a child there, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, the children that have that unhurried time outside, they're able to really relax, and you can see that you can see them kind of taking a step back and actually realizing that they're not being told to do something necessarily, or right, you need to finish that and then go to this activity, or right, we're going to do this first and then you can do that. They're given that opportunity to go and explore that environment in the way that they choose. And then often what I've found when I've been outside with them, they will come to an activity that I might have set up, and hope that somebody might come there. So there's no expectation that they do come and do any of the activities that I set up outside during one of my outdoor learning sessions. But often in their own time, they will then come round to that activity because they've then been and explored the area. One little boy liked to walk all the way around the perimeter, just checking the walls first, and that was his thing. So, once he'd done that, he would have a go on the swing, or we'd come to the potion making station that we'd set up, and but there was no expectation that he had to come there first and then he could do his thing. It was the children could go and explore in their own way, knowing that where the fire circle was or where the adults were, so that they could come in and check in. And obviously the area was secure. I did do all those checks first, and you've got all your assessments that you do your site your site risk assessment before you start any session like that. But if you're confident in your mind that all those things have been done and checked off, then children should feel that sense of security themselves and coming to the session regularly as well. So not just as a one-off, because I don't think they're necessarily going to reap the benefits from it if they're not coming regularly. So the forest school principle is that it's over an extended period of time, and it's a regular session. So regular meaning once a week if you can, or maybe more if you can, or once every other week, but not leaving it or not just coming as a one-off and expecting children to build on those skills and their dispositions and being able to really fully immerse themselves in those activities. So giving them that sense of security by repeating the same pattern, repeating the routine, and having similar things for them to come back to week in, week out really helps them, supports them.
I guess in terms of that routine and coming back to the forest, it's sometimes difficult for children to get used to that forest environment because they may live in built-up areas, or they may not actually go to the forest or have never been to the forest, and just perhaps to a playground or a park. So like you say, that familiar environment really supports them to feel comfortable with the forest and actually then be able to explore, because a lot of the time we may not see children explore straight away. And I think that's what's important for parents and families to understand, especially because their children might come away from forest school, or they might ask them questions about forest school and they may not have much to say, or they may kind of not have many positive things to say initially. So there's that worry of, as my child being kind of asked to do something or participate in something that they don't like, that isn't their thing, that they're not enjoying, but actually it's about giving them a chance to experience it and find the joy in it and get used to what they're doing, this new experience that they're having. Yeah,
so that's why going back to the principle of that, it's a period of time and it's regular access. So children aren't expected to just get forest school or know what to expect after the first session. It should be regular access. But again, thinking back to some of the key messages from the article, if you haven't got access to a forest area, you can apply those principles in the same way to just being outside, or just having a little bit more access to an outdoor environment and nature space. It doesn't necessarily have to be a woodland, because not everybody has that opportunity to be, or they might know where some local woods are, but it might be more of a hassle in terms of organising how you might get there, that sort of thing. So just be thinking about, do you have a local park that you could go to, or is there a little bit more space in your yard that you can cultivate that could allow for some of these benefits to be supportive of the child when they're outdoors. I did read another article, and it was thinking about children's well-being and their health and their immunity as well. So there was a study in Denmark, and it looked at children that were in kindergartens, that were in urban settings, and they did this study with a group of children. They tested their immunity through their gut bacteria, and actually what they found is just by introducing more natural elements into their own outdoor play and allowing them more extended periods outdoors, their immunity increased over a month. So it actually really supports children's immunity as well. So I know some barriers from parents, some practitioners as well may say, it's too cold to go outside, or it's too wet, like we've just discussed, but actually it really benefits your immunity as well as your well-being and your physical development as well. So, I would argue, and we know from COVID that actually being outside is more beneficial for us, because it reduces the spread of infections as well. So this time of year, I would argue, is probably more case for you to be getting outside and using the outdoor environment.
Yeah, definitely. And when you mentioned there in terms of children's physical development as well and health, there are guidelines from the NHS and various kind of other, organisations that you mentioned slightly in your article. Do you have some kind of statistics to share with us on that? Because a lot of the time it is really interesting to hear that and actually think, are our children getting enough, especially children that we work with or children that we know?
Yeah. So the NHS and the World Health Organization stipulate that children under 5 should have 180 minutes, which is 3 hours of physical activity a day. 60 minutes of that should be vigorous, moderate to vigorous activity. So getting out of breath, feeling the heart racing. That doesn't have to be an aerobics class for 60 minutes. We're not saying getting them all doing your Jane Fonda on. That's probably something that's harks back to my age. But, we're not saying it has to be a 60-minute aerobics class. But it's over time, but 60 minutes should be the amount that children are getting daily. I read another interesting article when I've been researching some of my work, and this was a study that was conducted just after the pandemic. So they were looking at activity levels and sedentary behaviour in children and parents following the COVID pandemic. 8 children are actually sedentary, less active for 8 minutes less a day on a weekend and a weekday every day. So that is 8 minutes a day that they are not moving since restrictions have been lifted. So in 2021, so that's a startling amount per day that they're losing out on being active. They're using more sedentary time. They're often on tablets. They're not getting outside. They're not moving their bodies. And that couples with the statistic of 41% of 10 to 11-year-olds do not meet the recommended activity guidelines of 60 minutes of vigorous activity a day. So, those 10 to 11-year-olds are already, nearly half of them are not getting 60 minutes. And that's, like I said, it's not a 60 minutes aerobics class. It's over the course of the day. So it could be a 10-minute spurt here, a 10-minute spurt there, like I said, but they're not getting it. So, your outdoor environment is perfect for that. You've got all sorts of opportunities to move in different ways, to get out of breath. And what I've found sad over this last year is some of the groups of children that I've worked with, school groups of children, some older children, a little bit older than early years, have said, small little hills, they've never rolled down a hill before. Oh, that's just a simple really joy sad. Of childhood. They've not moved in that way, and they're in school. So, if you think about that coupled with some of those statistics that I've just said, there's a real need for us to promote the outdoor and to get children moving and to embrace being maybe a little bit cold, but you'll warm up when you're outside and you're active. And I think, again, going back to my forest school training a year ago, I was a bit worried because I like to say I'm a bit nesh.
I am as well.
But outside I was fine because I had, the right gear on again.
And you were moving with the children, I bet, as well.
Exactly. So I didn't even notice it really. And all of my training, I think in some ways it's been a good way around to do it. I did my training, all my pilot sessions in the autumn and winter. So when it came to summer, I was like, oh, this is novel.
This is lovely.
So I think we need to be thinking about promoting the NHS and the WHO guidelines on physical activity. And again, it doesn't all have to be outside if you're struggling, but it's more conducive to that large movement to get into.
I was just going to say that.
And there's lots of different ways that children can move outside rather than inside, isn't there?
Just quickly, I wanted to thank all the listeners for tuning into the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Those of you who are regular listeners will know that a new episode comes out every Monday morning, ready for your commute, morning coffee, or that reflective start to the week to get you thinking and in the zone. If you haven't already done so, it would really help this podcast to keep going if you subscribe to the channel that you're listening on. The Voice of Early Childhood podcast can be found on 19 different podcast platforms and on YouTube. So it's highly likely that you, your friends, and colleagues can find it on your favorite streaming platform. So please do hit the subscribe button, and this will help us to keep putting out thought-provoking, reflective, and insightful episodes with a wide range of guests. Thank you. I'll let you get back to the episode now. Yeah. There's so many different ways for them to explore their bodies, and that is all part of learning, isn't it? All we need to remember and encourage parents to understand that movement is not just for physical development and health. No. It is their learning. This is how children learn. They're learning through play. They're learning through understanding their own bodies. And that's why it's so vital to have active play, because that is their way of learning. And when you mentioned at weekends, children tend to move less. I think it's important to discuss with parents ways that they can support their children to move more and get those kind of even like you say, the 60 minutes of vigorous exercise. It doesn't have to be a specific activity. It can just be walking somewhere rather than driving. So walking to the park rather than driving to the park. Actually, on that walk, which may be, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes, that's quite a lot for a child, especially if they're under 5, because they won't necessarily just be walking at the same pace. They might do a little sprint, or do a little skip, and they start getting out of breath. They, if there's more than one child there, they might chase each other, and hop and bounce. And it's just kind of really understanding that there's so many opportunities for physical development and active movement through normal day-to-day, I was going to say activities, but just routines, actually, just normal daily routines.
Yeah. And I think also moving on from that, the link to actually formal learning as well, that children, like you said, children learn through moving their bodies physically, particularly in the early years, that's how they experience the world, through movement. And, if you look at the development from a baby to a 1-year-old to a 2-year-old, that is all physical development. And their feelings are interconnected with that, they're making connections with their movement. But actually, I think it goes further. And I think children who are in school, often we're priming them to sit still, but sitting still is one of the hardest control mechanisms of your body. You have to have really good coordination and control, and that only comes from practicing movement. You can't do that by not having all of those experiences of rolling, of swinging, of hanging upside down, of hopping, of twirling. You need to have that because it challenges the vestibular system, and that is the inner ear control center, where it tells you and it gives you that sense of balance. And actually, to sit still is one of the hardest things to do, and that's what we're asking young children to do all the time. And if they're
not yet ready,
they're concentrating on sitting still. Can they concentrate on doing anything else? Probably not, because it's so hard. So actually, if we give them lots of movement to do throughout the day and actually be outside, and if they're learning while they're outside and playing, then even better, that they're actually in their element, as they say. They're actually absorbed in something they're motivated by, that they've perhaps chosen, that's open-ended, and you can probably find all the links to the curriculum that you need in that outdoor area without having to worry about, are they sitting still and concentrating. They're getting all of that because they're doing it innately. So I think it's important to remember that development process as well. We talk about children's play and learning, but it's actually linked to their development. And some of these theories about how children learn and linking it to their movement control and the vestibular system have been written about by Sally Goddard-Blythe. You've got Angela Hanscom from America, who's a pediatric occupational therapist. She's founded a forest school over there called Timbernook in America, where that's looking at supporting children's physical development, being outside, climbing trees, because they've seen how much it impacts on children's other areas of learning, reading, writing, academic progress. Even children that have perhaps dyslexia or dyspraxia, sometimes it can be linked to an immature vestibular system and not having those experiences earlier on. So if we do lots of work on balance and movement, that can be improved for those children. So, if we bring it back around to children with additional needs, actually, some of those children, if they're experiencing those difficulties, will be benefiting hugely from being outside because they're moving their bodies in ways that they won't do inside. And it's actually helping with their concentration, with their ability to, coordinate their bodies and get that core stability to be able to sit down when they come back in, and they've got that movement to support them with all of that.
And it all comes from large muscle movements anyway, doesn't it? From the outside in, making sure that those gross motor skills are supported and developed first before those fine motor skills can be focused on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was also going to say, in terms of outdoor learning, it really lends itself to learning through sensory ways, for all the 5 senses. And that is the way that children learn as well, especially the younger children. But I know that there are children that aren't too keen on getting messy and muddy and things like that, and actually they don't really seem to enjoy sensory experiences and activities. And I remember when I did forest school, they weren't really forest school, they were woodland learning sessions, but kind of based on forest school. We just didn't kind of offer forest school sessions because of the training that we didn't have. But everything was in a forest, and we provided lots of different kind of opportunities for children to explore with their senses and really encourage that. But I always remember there was one little boy in my preschool sessions, and he was very reluctant to engage in anything kind of sensory, and he just didn't seem to like things on his hands, and we had to work with him a lot in order to support him in becoming comfortable. So I wondered if you have any tips for educators around that, because actually there's so many benefits of the outdoors around the senses. But if a child is actually distressed around that, how do we support them? And do we try and get them to engage, or, do we kind of...
I think what you need to remember is being outside in itself is a sensory experience. So, the feeling
so
of the wind
first
on
step.
your face. You are actually engaging in a sensory activity just being outside, more so than you can be inside, because you're going to feel different, the wind blowing in different directions. You might notice the sunlight coming through the trees, or you might hear the birds, and then you might hear the sound of water. If you're close to water, you'll hear the rustling of the leaves. So there's lots of sensory opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily get outside anyway. And then I think, again, going back to some of the forest school principles and applying that unhurried approach is just taking that step back, going at the child's pace. And one of the principles of forest school practice is that you are a reflective practitioner, and it is child-led. So you should be, rather than, saying, oh, you need to get involved in that mud kitchen and start digging some mud pies, you need to be offering those opportunities, scaffolding children, seeing and praising them. A lot of opportunities for developing children's growth mindset in the forest, offering them challenges. So it might be that they might initially be drawn to other activities, but I think you'll soon find after a while, when they've been coming to that setting for quite some time, they will find ways that they feel comfortable in engaging in a more sensory activity. And it might be that you offer different types of tools. You could have, big spades, large rakes, things like that, that might promote, one, the physical skills, but two, engaging in a more sensory activity. But they don't necessarily have to get their hands dirty or have that feeling, because it can be, some children do find that a bit distressing or uncomfortable. And that's just different personalities, isn't it, or different responses. So we do respect that. And, but I've not noticed any child that's come to a forest school to not want to engage in some kind of activity that's available to them. And often, more often than not, they're picking up bugs, or they're touching trees, or playing with clay, and, they're without a second thought. Whereas in the classroom, they might have been a bit more reticent, because it's like, oh, well, I've got my school uniform on and I can't get dirty. I've been told I need to keep clean. So I think there's just a different sense of freedom as well outside that perhaps helps to break down some of those barriers for some of the children.
Yeah, definitely. Again, like going back to what we were saying about taking time and children getting used to it and it becoming a routine. So like you said, children will probably start to open up to those experiences and opportunities a little bit more as they start to become comfortable with the forest. And it's a really interesting point that you made, actually, that being outdoors is just a sensory experience in itself, even if you don't really do anything, you're just kind of there. And you're so right. And that reminds me again of when we were discussing mental health specifically, and being outdoors and that being good for mental health. And we mentioned going for walks and that being kind of part of physical activity. And just that simple aspect of being outdoors and going for a walk is just so beneficial. And I know in your article you mentioned forest bathing. So that's does that mean, I read about this a few years ago, and it, for me, I could relate to it because of walks that I had with my friend in the forest, like quite regular, maybe once or twice a week, and we'd start to kind of open up to each other more about our mental health and different kind of things that we're thinking and feeling. And it seemed that it was a natural thing before I even heard of what forest bathing was. And I thought, actually, this is what I do. And I think it really kind of hearing that term or reading about that term really made me reflect on it and think, this is beneficial for me and why. And I think it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that being outdoors just makes you feel a little bit more comfortable and relaxed, and you can kind of, like we said at the beginning, let go of issues, or perhaps feel more confident to open up. And we do see this in children, don't we, in terms of some children actually come out of their shells outside.
Yeah, I've seen that. And I think it's, so often I've heard, maybe from teachers when children have come to visit at the forest school session, or sometimes from parents, about various behavioural issues or problems that they might encounter when they're in school, but then they come to like an outdoor learning environment or a forest session, and you don't really see any of that, and you're like, okay. But I think it links back to what you've just said, really, Angelica. It's about that different space just being more open and unique for them, and actually more containing, and in some ways emotionally containing. And it is touched on in the course that I did, the therapeutic skills for outdoor learning, about how this is a really beneficial space for children, particularly that have perhaps trauma or other issues, adverse childhood experiences, those sort of aspects that have been in their lives, that they can have that space, that sense of freedom. Often can feel quite enclosed or trapped maybe inside, and that might be part of the behavioural issues. So children being outside can actually have that calming, soothing effect where they've got that space. They can go off if they wanted to and be a bit noisier or louder. You talked about sharing some of your own mental health on your walks, but actually you could go out and into a field or on the top of a hill and scream really loudly, and that doesn't matter. You wouldn't do that inside. So there's somebody can't tell you, oh, be quiet, use an indoor voice. You can actually go and do that. And maybe that's something, if you notice in your children that's something they need, you could start a session by being, let's do a really loud scream and let all out the feelings out and anger out and shake it off, and then let them go off and explore. So, and again, things like having little areas where there is that sense of space, but then also in a sense of enclosure where they can maybe hide and be a bit more, private, where they can feel a bit safer. But it's something that perhaps you can get them involved in making their own space, like demos, so they're actually learning skills whilst they're doing that and creating that space for themselves. So I think it's that unique environment where there is a nurture, there's a sense of calm, there isn't that enclosed space, there's not somebody telling you what to do necessarily, because that is one of the ethos of and principles of forest school learning is, the child is the leader. You're looking and observing what's motivating them, what's interesting them. You take the lead from the child. So there's a bit more sense of freedom for the child as well. So they maybe don't feel those constraints and that pressure, which I think, as much as we'd like to think we don't, I think there's just a pressure of, well, you're in a learning space and you should be, writing this and doing that and, adding up or counting. And actually it can come quite naturally to them when they're applying some of those skills in an outdoor environment where there isn't the pressure on, where they feel like they're being watched or assessed or observed.
Yeah. And that expectation that in this activity or in this corner on this table, this is how you play, this is the task, this is the goal. Actually, when you eliminate that, then children really use their own curiosities. And it's almost like that idea that people talk about allowing children to get bored, to feel bored, so then they can actually begin
come up with their own.
Exactly. And start to kind of execute their own ideas and curiosities. I found it really interesting actually that you mentioned a few times enclosed spaces outdoors, and it seems contrasting that we both discussed like the wideness, the vastness of the outdoors and the big open space, but at the same time also both agree, and it's such a common practice in forest schools to have dens and small spaces, and it's because, like we say, it's so outdoors, and especially nature and forests are so therapeutic that actually, as well as feeling that freedom that children have to express themselves and run and shout, they also feel very calm because of the nature of the outdoors and nature itself, that then they do need that space to retract and feel calm and comfortable and allow themselves to embrace those calming feelings of the outdoors, as well as those freeing and big kind of feelings and emotions.
And you know, that opportunity for them to rest as well. I think personally, I have kind of been looking into this a little bit more myself, but Article 31 of the UN Conventions on the Right of the Child is all about children's access to play, culture and rest. And, you know, I think innately the forest school ethos just does that perfectly, because, you know, it's culturally that connecting with their local environment, you know, what's around them, they're understanding more about nature. They're learning about the different species that live in their environment. They might become more connected to nature in the sense of wanting to care for it. And then they're also have that innate play opportunities where they're not being told how to play or how to do things. It's given over to them to choose how to do and create their own play space. It's open-ended, so there's no right or wrong way to use the resources in a forest. It's nature, you know, so nature is open-ended in itself. And then finally, that sense of rest, you know, it's a space where they can actually come to rest as well. So you might have hammocks that children can just chill in and, you know, take a breather. You might have a little area where there's some log circles that they can sit down on and take a breather, or like we said, it could be a tarpaulin just over a piece of string, or they might make their own little hidey nook or den. So, you know, that sense of sense of nurture, sense of space, a sense of rest. And then finally at the end, you know, we often end every session with that coming around together as that sense of belonging, that fire circle where everybody can sit around the fire. And, you know, there's often a lot of silence and a lot of staring into the fire and obviously anticipation for hot chocolate and a s'more. But it's just it's, you know, and you can feel that sense of calm. And I think children don't, you know, whilst they're out in the forest, and it can be an opportunity to be very active, they don't have to be active all the time. And I think that's why, coming back to what we were saying, it doesn't have to be 60 minutes, they're flat out running around. You know, there will be times when they might have climbed up a tree and they're just chilling and watching and taking it all in, you know, but they've done that bit of exercise, that exertion, and now they're taking a breather. And I think that's, again, the beauty of being outside and not having that unhurried time, because children can choose when they want to rest. And, you know, it's not right, we've done 15 minutes of activity, now you're going to rest. Everybody can choose when and how they want to do that. And some children might still be being active and playing a game, or, you know, digging in the mud kitchen, or, you know, building a den, while some children might be relaxing. So there's that. If it's an extended period of time and it's unhurried, then children can approach that and do that in their own way.
And I think that's a great kind of summary of your article. Really, it's all about that main message of the therapeutic nature of the outdoors, and really taking time to slow down and tuning into the kind of the benefits of the outdoors for mental health and well-being, and not just kind of the physical aspects. So I think this episode in your article really get a lot of practitioners and families as well to think about the outdoors in a slightly different way to the kind of the usual narrative that we have. So thank you for that. I think it's great to be able to have that slightly different perspective, you know, even if we sometimes have it in our mind, in the back of our minds. Actually, it's great to bring it to the forefront, and especially, like you say, around kind of mental health day and month generally, and when we really have this focus, especially at this time of year, I guess, when we start to kind of dip into those feelings around kind of our mental health starting to go downhill a little bit with the weather changes and all and it getting darker and things like that. Actually, it's important to embrace the joy in outdoors and in nature still.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really lovely message to end on. And, you know, remember, going back to that example that I gave, like, children will embrace the weather if they're well equipped, and actually there's still joy to be had in a really rainy, wet day where you've got lots of puddles. I mean, I don't know any child that can't resist jumping in a puddle.
Definitely.
And then, you know, you've got the frosty days to come, haven't we? And all of potentially a bit of snow, maybe. So, there's lots of benefits, and it's all multi-sensory, like we came back to. So, and it really does boost your physical well-being and your mental well-being. And I think for all children, but particularly children with additional needs, that's something that we need to be thinking about, especially if they can't articulate how they're feeling, because I know that often children that do struggle to tell you how they feel can actually be suffering twice as much with mental health issues than those that can articulate. It's very much at the forefront of our minds as well now about emotional literacy. But how do we help those children that haven't got those skills? So actually giving them the experiences and opportunities to find that voice, and also to have that therapeutic need met by being outside, I think will go a long way to supporting their emotional well-being as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think let's encourage everyone to get their wellies out, especially the adults, because children will be up for it, and get all wrapped up and warm and get outside.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for joining. It's been brilliant.
Thanks a lot.